Hello friends, it's Alina, and in this video we'll dive into the 5 things you need to know about this November 2021 full moon, also known as a Beaver moon, and partial lunar eclipse in the Earth sign of Taurus. We'll dive into what exactly a Beaver moon is, the transit surrounding it, why this eclipse is a great time for going with the flow rather than trying to harness the energy, and as always, at the end I'll offer some customized full moon and eclipse writing prompts. And before we dive in, I have to mention that all of the moon phases, eclipses, and astrological events mentioned in this video, along with this entire year's and 2022's, are found in the Auralign Astrology Planner. It's an annual planner packed with notifications for every full moon, new moon, moon phases, astrological events, dedicated full and new moon ritual pages for journaling along with these videos, and so much more. But with all of that said, if you're interested in learning more, you can follow the link on the screen here or in the description box below. And with that said, let's jump in. Why is this full moon so important? This Taurus partial lunar eclipse happening on November 19th, depending on your time zone, is the first Taurus eclipse that we've seen since 2014. It's also the first eclipse marking the beginning of a new eclipse cycle that we will be seeing unfolding over the next months and years. This is also, more specifically, the first eclipse of a set occurring along the Taurus-Scorpio axis. So while the next eclipse we have next month will be in the sign of Sagittarius, a majority, if not all, of the eclipses over the next 2 years will be in either Scorpio or Taurus. So the themes and energy that we experience during this lunar eclipse will definitely be indicative of the themes going forward over the next 2 years. It can be very fruitful to actually reflect on where you are at this time around 2014, the last time that we had an eclipse in the sign of Taurus. I like to sometimes describe lunar eclipses as full moons on steroids. They're seen as an energetic time that can bring huge shifts, sudden endings, and encourage us to let go and embrace new chapters in our lives. So while full moons can normally be a great time for divination work and doing spells, during eclipses it can be very beneficial to seek rest and grounding during this more chaotic and unexpected waves of energy. As well, in general, full moons are seen as a culmination point. I often describe them as a cosmic spotlight midway through the lunar cycle, illuminating what has and hasn't been working for us. And just as we see how the full moon raises the tides and can impact water, so too can our emotional and intuitive abilities be raised. This is why full moons and lunar eclipses can be seen as very emotional times, bringing in more emotion and attention to that within the realms of relationships, fertilization, and romance. The full moon is also strongly associated with raised tension. As we see with all full moons, they occur when the moon forms an opposition aspect with the sun. And as some of you might know, opposition aspects in astrology describe tension or an opposition between two opposing needs. And for this full moon and eclipse, we have the sun in Scorpio, bringing in themes of tapping into our shadow selves in more private worlds. And we see this opposing the moon in Taurus, bringing in themes of grounding, heightened senses, and sensuality. So an overarching lesson we'll be seeing during this eclipse time, with the days leading up to it, its peak, and a few days following, will be finding balance, this yin and yang, this dichotomy between being open to our shadow selves, our inner, more private worlds, and that self-exploration, being open to uncomfortable truths, and leaning into our sensory activities, external stimuli, and things that might even pacify us or distract us away from that deeper work. How do you find balance and grounding while also holding space for your deeper emotions or shadow self? While leaning into these Taurus full moon themes of indulging in our senses, whether that's sight through television or, interacting with the world, hearing through music, touch through, social interactions, and taste through, different foods and so on, and finding grounding through these very human experiences. How can we balance that and prevent those experiences from potentially pacifying or distracting us from the deeper psychological work or from acknowledging life's truth, the good and bad of life, whether it's within our inner worlds, interpersonal, or our larger community? I think that conversation is so important, especially if we are looking to have a spiritual path and dive into our intuitive abilities, especially if we want to prevent ourselves from projecting potential unprocessed baggage while we're trying to tap into how we perceive the world and our intuition from a clear perspective. And finally, for anyone curious, the Beaver moon is a nickname for the full moon that occurs every year in November. And it's named after the beaver because this is the time of the year that beavers oftentimes seek shelter leading up to the colder winter months. Now, while this moon is named after, just like with many moons, after aspects of nature, it's very important for us to remember that we, as well as nature, are in the same rhythms of the earth, right? So we have the colder months coming ahead, and it's very important to prepare for that time, find that shelter, create our schedules to prevent stress as we're running around during holiday seasons. Next, what transits impact this full moon and eclipse? First, on the day of the eclipse, we have the moon squaring off with Jupiter, the planet of good luck and optimism. As many of you know, a square aspect in astrology, similar to an opposition in an aspect, indicates tension between the two astral bodies involved. So we have this full moon in Taurus bringing in themes and energy of engaging in our sensory pleasures for grounding, squaring off with Jupiter, bringing in good luck, expansion, and optimism. So this is a transit that often encourages spiritual expansion and evolution, and this can be seen through socializing and exchanging of ideas. There is some potential of overindulgence as we see, this Taurus energy of indulging and then this expansion aspect with Jupiter. But a great way to find balance with this is leaning into spiritual practices and charitable engagements or charitable work in general, whether it be in your immediate community or within your interpersonal world. A lot of the potential overindulgence or overindulgence in distractions or being pacified can really be linked with being self-centered. So looking at how we can expand our perspective towards others and help others during this time can be incredibly beneficial and lead to many lucky exchanges. Next, we have the moon trining Pluto. As many of you know, a trine aspect in astrology indicates acceptance and energetic support between the two astral bodies involved. So we have this Taurus full moon, bringing in, as mentioned before, these themes of sensory experiences, finding grounding in whatever way that looks unique to you, trining, having this collaborative energy with Pluto, this planet of the subconscious, transformation, and spiritual development. Now, this transit can lend itself to the already existing heightened emotions and intuitive abilities during this time. So something that will be very fruitful, as mentioned before, not just for this transit, but also because we have the sun in Scorpio, will be looking into shadow work and deeper self-exploration. And finally, Venus will be a very active player during this eclipse time, as it is the natural ruler of Taurus. Venus rules over matters of love, the heart, and finances. I think that diving into our emotional and relationship aspects of our lives, along with shadow work, will definitely be bringing up aspects of what we value most to the surface. Having deeper understanding of the patterns in our lives that have impacted the current relationships we have will really be a big theme during this time if you're open to that self-exploration. This can be done through talk therapy, articulating, your ideas and feelings with friends, or even things like journaling. How should we expect to feel? As mentioned before, with all eclipses bringing in the potential of sudden changes, energetic shifts, and new beginnings in our lives, looking at it in the context of Taurus and Venus being the natural ruler of that, I definitely feel like we should expect sudden changes when it comes to our relationships, new information coming to the surface, and building stronger bonds through, troubleshooting or figuring out those new waters and dynamics. Ways to align with this energy. Definitely leaning into Taurus themes of engaging in physical and sensory aspects or activities will be very fruitful during this time. This can look like engaging in an interactive or collaborative cooking experiences, for our taste buds. You know, this can look like maybe finally getting that massage to release some tension pent up physically in the body. This can look like maybe going to a yoga class or a workout class or following something on YouTube to physically move and engage those senses as well to release energetic tension or anything that might be built up. And as Taurus is an earth sign, finding that grounding through physically going on hikes, maybe camping, being outside, getting in touch with the earth energy as well can be very fruitful. I feel like oftentimes we can forget that we're completely surrounded by man-made things when we're indoors all the time, but we are organisms from the earth, you know? So getting that sunlight, getting the fresh air, fresh water, reconnecting with, you know, where our ancestors came from, which was outside of the house, can be very helpful with regulating our own energy. And with all of that said, I do want to add the caveat that everyone finds grounding in their own unique ways. For example, I find incredible grounding by meditating. I find incredible grounding by just going for walks, going to large parks if possible, if not a hike. And that looks different for everyone. Some people feel super called to be by bodies of water or to take baths. Those things can help people feel way more calm during chaotic times. Some people really enjoy being able to articulate where they're at, just being able to process things through having to, you know, say how they're feeling, and whether that looks like a verbal expression or writing it down. I feel like, especially on social media, there's always this push to do almost stereotypically deemed things that are grounding, but they can look different for everyone, and that's okay. And finally, explore shadow work if you feel called to dive deeper into that. Not everyone is called to do that, because exploring shadow work is essentially exploring your triggers. It's essentially exploring the roots to many of our patterns that often leads to more uncomfortable conversations. It's looking directly at ourselves and asking, why are you triggered by this experience over here? Where does that stem from? And also, how do you project your reality and your own experiences onto the world around you? Especially if you're interested in diving deeper into a spiritual path, in developing your intuitive abilities, it's very important for anybody on that path. And this is something that you'll find in any path across the world when you engage in a spiritual practice of diving into the root of your shadow self, diving into the root of whether or not you project certain things onto the world. And I'll actually dive into this deeper from my own experiences after the journal prompts. But this is because oftentimes we are perceiving the world and we're thinking, how do I intuitively feel about this person or this situation? And if we are unconsciously projecting our own fears, our own issues onto the world because subconsciously our ego wants to protect ourselves, then we're potentially analyzing incorrectly situations because we haven't done our own inner work. So all of that to say, this can be a very potent time for exploring those things, and I'm actually going to have 1 or 2 journal prompts to help kickstart that if you're interested. All right, y'all, finally, let's dive into these journal prompts. And if you have it, now's the time to pull out your Auralign Astrology Planner and flip over to the full moon ritual page where you can journal all of this. But if you don't have it, you don't need it. All you'll need will be a pen and paper. What I'll do is I will project the questions on the screen. I invite you to pause the video, write them out, unpause, and at the end, we'll come back. Is there anything you feel called to release during this full moon? What activities leave you feeling grounded during more chaotic times? In psychology, a projection refers to unconsciously taking unwanted emotions or traits you don't like about yourself and attributing them to someone else. We've all done it. In what ways have you done this in the past, or have you experienced it from others? Have you learned from these experiences? While the avoidance of processing tough truths can be detrimental, it is also a form of self-preservation for many. Has there been any deeper emotional or spiritual work you've avoided for similar reasons? Why or why not? All right, y'all, I hope you enjoyed those writing prompts. I'm gonna go ahead and answer a few of them to spark some conversation. And if anything came up for you, be sure to comment them in the, comment section, the doobity-doo below. So two activities that come to mind, actually three, that leave me feeling so grounded is meditation, hiking, or camping. If I could do camping, you know, a full weekend or even a week over hiking, I'd choose that. But the closest I can get to that with any given schedule is hiking, right? But specifically with meditation, I feel really called to remind y'all, any of y'all who might be beginner meditators, or maybe you haven't really been doing it consistently enough to see a rhythm in it, I have noticed I feel so grounded for meditation on a whole, like a deeper level after the 2 week or 3 week mark. And that's after 2 weeks or 3 weeks of doing it maybe every other day, or maybe even 3 days out of the week at minimum. But doing it once a day at any time, whenever it's convenient, for even 5 minutes can get you there as well. And the reason why I want to mention that is because I feel like for a long time when I was younger, I would try to meditate, but I would never do it consistently enough. And now that I've been doing it for so long, in reflection, at least for me, I've noticed that you get to that deeper level of meditation where your mind truly does rest. It doesn't feel like you need to calm it down. And your mind has rested into a certain, you know, vibration, a certain mode where it's able to really settle into that moment. Obviously, there can be distractions, things happen, but they happen a lot less after that sort of, after you get through this certain barrier. Like there's this barrier. And I noticed that even when I start meditation, even though people are like, oh, 20 minutes, oh my goodness, that's a long time, especially if you're new. The reason why I love 20-minute meditations is because I feel like for me, after the first 10 minutes, my brain has settled so much more and I'm able to truly enter what the meditation is supposed to be. So all of that to say, I just want to offer some encouragement to you. If you've tried it out and you're like, oh, I just can't settle my brain, it's kind of like a meditation muscle that you're working out. It's similar to going to the gym or trying anything new that involves muscle memory or, you know, learning a skill. It's really strengthening that muscle. So have heart. And if you're really starting it out, do guided meditations. For example, for this full moon, I'm going to be putting out a guided meditation, and it's specifically for people who are new to it, where I add commentary and add guidance along the way to help settle your mind. It doesn't need to be with me. You can download apps as well, but I just wanted to make that point for anyone who's interested. Okay, so I really love this shadow work prompt about understanding projections and, you know, talking about your own experience with projections. For me, I feel like, you know, I mentioned it before, projections really can be us just projecting, putting an overlaying filter onto the world of what we perceive it to be. And I actually talk about this a lot in one of my videos, which I'll link maybe up here in the description. It's on my main channel page if you scroll down, about how to strengthen your intuition. And like I mentioned before, it's so important to be self-aware of how we project things into the world, how our ego plays a role in our perception of reality, and really understanding it and working to deconstruct it to be able to better look at the world more clearly for what it is, be less likely to be manipulated by triggers to be pushed in different directions, for example, in politics where everything's being polarized right now, and being able to find grounding in your own energy, you know? And the reason why I bring this up as well is because shadow work is so vital when it comes to you know, your intuitive development, because you don't know if you're projecting or not. For example, with me, we all experience projections every day. So for example, with me, I'm a Black woman. I'll walk into a drugstore, and if I even step foot in the beauty aisle, I experience projections of people perceiving me as a potential theft or threat because I'm a Black woman. Yes, that is a reality that I deal with all the time. And that's just one. It could be a department store. It could be so many places. But if you are maybe a woman, if you are African American, you know, whatever, if you experience judgment off of literally you just existing, you're experiencing a projection from somebody who hasn't processed or done that shadow work to understand that we are all individual souls having a human experience, right? So that's where spirituality and actually diving into shadow work and acknowledging, you know, things like spiritual bypassing, for example. Oh my goodness. If for any of y'all who don't understand what that is, spiritual bypassing is essentially this new philosophy that's going around in the spiritual community of people basically wanting to bypass, go around, you know, if you're driving, atrocities and issues going on in the world. So for example, acknowledging that, you know, there are certain marginalized communities that are seeking spiritual enlightenment, that are seeking, you know, abundance and all the things that we're all, you know, seeking, but they have certain barriers that we might not experience. Acknowledging certain privileges we have, you know, seeking to help the greater world, you know, through collaboration. And doing that involves acknowledging the shadow side. Doing that means acknowledging these issues that are going on in the world and how we can help to elevate all of us. You know, another example of spiritual bypassing is saying, oh, I'm colorblind, I don't see, you know, I understand the intention behind that, right? It's like, no, you know, everyone's equal. Yes, that is a great first step, but let's dive deeper into the shadow work of that. Let's dive deeper into, you know, our unconscious biases that we've been, you know, conditioned with through television, through our parents, through our family members, through our community that hasn't done that work. How can we do that work to break those chains? I could talk about this forever, but y'all get my point. I thought that that was an important thing to bring up, especially during Scorpio season. You know, Scorpios are the types, I have family members who are Scorpios, to hold on to grudges, to hold on to, you know, triggers and all of these things naturally. But the flip side of that is that they're not ones to just brush away the truth. They're not ones to stay on the superficial level. They want that deeper understanding. They want to acknowledge the issues. So I think that this is a very fruitful time to dive into that if it interests you. All right, y'all, if you made it to the end of this video, I invite you to comment a food emoji. Whatever food emoji that you enjoy the most, comment it down below, because it'll communicate to me that you made it to the end of this video. And I feel like with this being a Taurus, you know, full moon sensory engagement, I know a lot of Tauruses who are complete foodies. You know, it's a lighthearted thing. So comment that, or comment if any of my answers to the journal prompts, you know, if you related to that at all, or if any of the journal prompts spark something completely different for you. I am so curious, and I love sparking those deeper conversations with fellow spiritual people who are at the very least excited or interested in diving deeper than, you know, the superficial. And finally, as mentioned before, be sure to check out the Auralign Astrology Planner. If you are interested in aligning your schedule with the moon phases, you know, retrograde, the cosmos, and the seasons, be sure to check it out because it is jam-packed with so many things. I didn't mention it before, but there's also seasonal guides and a lot. So with all of that said, I will leave you with my favorite quote, and that is, be gentle with yourself. Because life is about the journey, not the destination. All right, peace, friends.